Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mental Health Minutes, an extension of Keely Life, where we explore the H and heal regarding mental wellness. With these conversations, we hope to take the stigma out of mental health and finding a common language amongst us. I'm here with Gina Berkmeyer, LPC, licensed professional counselor, and we're here to talk about limiting beliefs. Hi, Gina. How are you?
Hey, April, good to see you again.
I know. So good as always, these conversations that we get to share.
Yeah.
So, well, let's jump in. This is something that's definitely new to me, definitely a new language. So, what does limiting belief mean?
Yeah, I think we have them all the time and we don't realize that we have them. And a lot of times they are relatively implicit. We can collect them from our upbringing, from the people we hang out with, from the things that we engage with in our social time, from what we're learning at work or what we're not learning at work. And a limiting belief is essentially anything that sort of stops us in our tracks when we begin to go for the goal. When we think about what is that next thing that we want to get to, or that next thing that we want to create, or that next thing we want to achieve. And a limiting belief is the thing that will literally limit us to how big we will dream, how far we will reach, and what we will believe about ourselves and the things that we can do.
So, is it like a little voice in the back of your head that's saying, "No, you can't do it," and so we don't pursue further? Is something along those lines?
Yeah, I think it's that's a really great way to say that. It's it can be anything from and we don't realize, so often we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? Like there's something that we see someone do, or something we're intrigued by that we
Mm-hmm.
would love to pursue, but then we will follow it up with something like, oh, I could never do that,
Right.
or I'm too old for that, or I'm too young for that, or I'm not smart enough for that, or I'm not fit enough for that, or I'm right. We forget that when we see that thing, that maybe we see it that someone else has achieved, or we're attracted to wanting to do this because it's just sort of how we're wired. And we look at that end goal and we forget, we just think that we have to jump from like where we are to the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that space of the present time, we just look at what we have and we think that that's when those limiting beliefs, instead of saying, oh, I could do that. I saw a post on LinkedIn. I wish I could remember exactly what it was, but this woman was talking about her daughter, and she said something to the effect of, I want to be an astronaut. And mom said, okay, what you'll need to do, you're going to need to go to school. You're going to need to study this. You're going to need to get a job with NASA. You're going to have to do this. And the daughter's listening, and the daughter goes, that's four things. I can do that. Right.
That's awesome.
Like, so in her mind, like, it didn't even dawn on her to think, wow, those are really four huge things, or those are four, seemingly impossible. I'm nine. Those are, those are four very large.
Right.
No, at nine, she's like, four things. I got this. I can do it. And so the hope and the dream, of course, is that that continues to be fed into as she grows, so that she doesn't have the limiting beliefs that come along. And what's interesting is that research actually shows us that limiting beliefs will prevent us from going after the things that we desire most and achieving the goals that we hold most dear. That our limiting beliefs are actually more powerful in preventing us from doing that than not having, physically having what we need. So rather than thinking about, I don't have the money for this, or I don't have the resources for this, or I presently don't have the education, or I don't have the geographical, I'm not placed geographically for what I want to do. Those things are kind of, they almost feel a little bit more like those are the legitimate things that you would think would be concerns and hurdles to jump as we're trying to get to our goal. But actually, they hold less weight in holding us back than the limiting beliefs that most frequently happen right inside of our head.
So, you explained, with the 9-year-old. So, when do limiting beliefs begin?
It's different for everybody. I think there are some people who can say, I've worked with clients who have said, for as long as I can remember, I've never felt like I was good enough, or I never felt like I could do the things that other kids could do, or I could achieve the things that other people could achieve. Sometimes you will hear people say, I had this horrible relationship in my life, and it really, my identity took a hit as a result of that relationship. And now I just don't have the confidence in myself. I don't believe I can do these things. I don't have the emotional margin or whatever it might be. So I think they can start at any point in life, but they can also stop at any point in life if we do some things to stop them.
So are there any commonalities amongst all of us that we typically have these certain limiting beliefs?
Well, I would say one commonality outside of a specific limiting belief, I think one commonality is where they're born. Like if we follow the root to the seed, most of the time the seed occurs at some point in childhood. And it's a message that we have taken in from a teacher, a coach, a parent, a caregiver, a peer, whatever, that has somehow made us question our capabilities, have somehow caused us to wonder or doubt ourselves when we're pursuing things. So I would say that is a very, very common factor in limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most, probably one of the most common that we've all said is, oh, I could never do that. I think we've all said that. Like we see somebody do something, we're like, man, that'd be amazing. But we're like, oh, I could never do that. And we say a lot of these limiting beliefs, we say rather flippantly, or I'm not smart enough for that, or wow, you're great at that. I could never do that. And we say them flippantly, but we don't realize we're kind of reinforcing something about ourselves when we say that, something we don't want to reinforce.
I think also it could be they may make those comments because we don't have the answers to break it down, right? We've done this before where you compartmentalize, can't even say that word, and you take it in little chunks, kind of like, action planning that the Keeley Companies does. You take it in chunks and then it doesn't look so big, right? It doesn't look so unimaginable that we can obtain it. So what are some tools? And do you have any in your box to help us unwire the current beliefs and actually reach?
Yeah, that's great. I love what you just said, because that is a big approach that I do take with clients when I work with somebody who really is coming up against limiting beliefs, like this is the goal and here are the walls that I'm hitting. So we'll sort of, first we challenge those, because one thing that's helpful is to remind ourselves we don't have to believe every thought that pops into our head. Mm-hmm. Just because it pops into our head doesn't mean it's true. So when we have these lenses that we're using to look at our future, to look at our plan, to look at our goals, and they're debilitating, they're muddying our view, we can really challenge, what is that made up of? Why do you think that about yourself? Where does that come from? And part of it is taking a look at how people view failure, because sometimes the limiting beliefs are an internal mechanism of protection to keep ourselves from reaching for the thing that we might fail at and then experiencing the shame of failure. For some people, that's just too debilitating. I call it the paralysis of perfectionism. You just rather not do anything rather than risk not being perfect at it. So I think that's something to consider when you're looking at this. And I think with that paralysis of perfection, as you're kind of unwinding that thread and looking at how you look at your fails, one of the big things that I look at with my clients is we're going to take the time to celebrate the tries. Mm-hmm. So I want you to tell me about a time when you tried something and you failed. I don't want you to tell me about a time you tried something and succeeded. We'll do that later. But tell me about a time that you tried something and you failed. And then we really will work sometimes to unpack, once we get underneath how horrible the failure felt, what did you learn? How did it feel to try? Were you excited at the beginning? And kind of reminding ourselves of some of those positive aspects of the try and teaching ourselves to celebrate the try. I don't think we do enough of that in our culture as a whole. I don't think we celebrate the tries. We celebrate the successes. We don't celebrate the tries. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing is taking it piece by piece. When you say, I want my PhD, oh, I could never do that. I'm not smart enough to do that, or I don't have the resources to do that, or whatever. Or people in my family don't get PhDs. I've heard that one sometimes. Well, what's the first step you would need to take to do a PhD? Right. Well, I'd have to get my undergrad. Well, do you have your undergrad? Yeah. Okay. Well, so then let's check that off the list. Do you not have your undergrad? No. Well, then let's take a look at some undergrad programs.
Mhm.
What can we, let's get you, if you're an adult, let's get you in a real life situation where you get some credit for the life that you're living. You get
Mhm.
job credit, whatever. Or I want to run a 10K. I can't run a 10K. I'm not fit enough. Okay. Can you walk your block? Can you start there? And so really pulling back the reins and saying, let's just sort of pull this apart and we can put the goal up on the board and leave
Mhm.
that be, but let's look at what's right in front of you that would take you this much closer. We call that just right challenges. Whenever we ask our brain, if we're here and we ask ourselves to do something that's up here that we can't really reach, we're not going to do that. But if we can look at it that this is where we are, but this is where we want to be first, that's a just right challenge. We can reach that. It requires just a little bit of reach. We can do that. And I think the other piece that's really important is we typically, one question I will ask my clients is, tell me about something hard that you've done. So tell me about something difficult. Rarely on the side of completion or the side of success, we very rarely give the weight of what it took to do that what it deserves. We tend to look back and say, I did that. Well, it wasn't that hard. Like, we want to minimize how hard it was. We forget
Mhm.
about the mountains we've already climbed. We forget about those things that we've done that were hard, that did require a lot of work, that maybe there was a time we could have looked at that and thought, I'm never going to get through this, but we did. And so I think it's really important to rehearse any moments you have like that in your life, to rehearse those moments, because they really do sort of propel us into believing we can do the next thing.
Mhm. I had a conversation with Nora the other day because, her sister had said, "No, you can't do it. It's just way too much to even tackle." It was about she had to take a swim test in order to go off the diving board and swim where we were at, and her sister did it and passed, and she's like, "There's no way I can swim that long or tread that long." And so she talked herself out of it, and then we had a side conversation, and try and what's going to hurt, what's going to be the worst outcome. You don't get to go off the diving board, right? But you tried, or you could, right? And then you get to have even more fun and do these things that you see your sister doing. And but it was a limiting belief. Like, she was like, no, I can't do it. And I was like, but if you fail, then you know what to work on. But if you never try, you don't even know where you really need to put your efforts, right?
Right.
So
That's
it was kind of cool to see, with a 5-year-old, and she did it, she nailed it. And like, and any little time it boosts your confidence, which I think is what you need to get to the next step, as
Mhm.
well. Right.
I
So,
agree with that. And again, to your point, that was her big sister, and not out of malice, but just this one little comment of, maybe even out of care, no, you're too little. That's too hard.
right.
Don't do that. And so, but before that, it might not have even dawned on her to question that she could do it. She would have just been like, I'm going to try this thing. So it is interesting where those little seeds can come from, for sure.
How much does fear play with limiting beliefs?
A lot, a lot. And I think, again, that's a place where we might want to look at, were we raised in an environment that encouraged trying things? Or
Mm-hmm.
were we raised in an environment that encouraged fearing everything, especially new things, right?
Okay.
Because fear is contagious. And I think fear is generational. And I think that we can, and sometimes it's protective. I mean, I don't want to ignore that. But sometimes even that aspect of protection that fear offers is maladaptive. It's protective when we don't need it to be protective, right? Like jumping off the diving board or trying
Right.
to swim from the diving board. So I think fear does play a huge role. And the really cool thing about fear is that we can also learn to say, it's fascinating how when we call things into the light, how much they lose their power. So when it's, yeah, I want to try that, but I'm afraid, by saying, yeah, I want to try that, but I'm afraid, fear loses a little bit of its power. Once it's spoken out into the light, it's exposed to the light, something happens that just sort of takes some of the sting out. And learning to adopt phrases in our heads and learning to adopt ways of believing that allow for fear, that say, yeah, I am afraid of that. I'm going to do it anyway. Just because I'm afraid doesn't mean I have to not do it.
Right.
Just because I may fail doesn't mean I shouldn't try. And so, or just because I don't feel like putting myself out there doesn't mean I shouldn't put myself out there. I mean, we can teach ourselves to train our brains to think a little bit differently about how we try and when we try and how big our tries are.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the things that set us back is, just being in public, right? And wow, I mean, if I fail, I mean, someone's going to see me. So kind of just, there's other avenues of why don't I try it in a place where I feel comfortable first, and so just walking through different things. So maybe it's a limiting belief may stop you at a specific moment, but it doesn't mean that it has to stop you from going down that path, right? Eventually.
Right. And I think that's important. So the first time that I ever spoke in front of people, the first time I was ever asked to speak in front of people, I was asked to speak to an audience of 500. And I'd never talked to a large audience before. And I said, not yet. I wanted to say no because I was terrified of it. And so, but instead what I said was not yet. I would like to do this presentation for you. Can we push this off? Would you be willing to let me do it at your next meeting next quarter? And they said yes. So in the interim, I tweaked what I wanted to talk about, and I first did it in front of just a few friends. And then I did it I offered it as something free to do at a counseling center, and I did it in front of 25 people. And then it wasn't a jump for me. I know that's weird, but from 25 to 500, I was like, okay, I've done it twice. Here's what went well, here's what didn't go well. And so that was very helpful for me to be able to do that. And then I was able to jump from 500 to 1,000 and then more. So, but I couldn't have I don't think I could have stepped on the stage when they wanted me to. I think I would have had to do a lot of work maybe to come back from that. I don't know if I could have done that as easily as just let me get this. So to your point, figure out what do you need to get there. If in your head you're like, that's not something I'm ready for. Well, that's okay. What are you ready for? Mm-hmm. What are you ready for that takes you closer to being ready for the thing you ultimately want?
Yeah. No, that's a great example.
Thanks.
Well, do you have anything else to add, Gina, for us?
I would say if you suspect that you are coming up against some limiting beliefs in pursuing the next level of your career or the next level of a relationship or fitness or whatever that might be, don't keep that inside. Don't have those internal conversations. The internal conversations are what's holding you back to begin with. So don't let that internal chatter stay internal. Take it to someone, take it to a trusted friend, a pastor, a counselor, therapist, a coach, a life coach, maybe even somebody who is your boss, someone who is championing you in the workplace and wants to see you move forward, wants to see you grow and achieve more. Take it to that person and just be honest. I would be very suspicious of anyone who said to me they've never had a limiting belief go through their head or a limiting thought go through their head. So I think it's a place where we can all say, yep, I get it. Maybe not in the same level, but we can at least to some degree all say, yep, I get it. I get it. Let me help you with that.
We're all human, right?
We're all human. We're all human. That's right.
Well, thanks again, Gina. This concludes this episode of Mental Health Minutes. Stay healthy, Keely. Until next time.